Welcome to the story behind the story. I'm Dana Hourany, the producer of our podcast, and also your host for this first episode. I'm a reporter, and I like to tell other people's stories. The challenge, however, is to tell my own. This podcast came to life because we wanted to put our voices behind our articles and bring you an inside view of our job. This podcast is not just about us, the reporters at Now. It is to give a glimpse into what it means to be a journalist during these times. Political crises, economy in free fall, no electricity, long lines at gas stations, a cold winter, poverty. We cover them all, we also live them all. Journalists venture outside during pandemic lockdowns with a mask and a bottle of disinfectant. We cover protests and riots. We interpret data from Excel sheets, design infographics, shoot videos, and take pictures. We do our best to pressure politicians, and we ask the questions. This is our story, and this is the story behind one of my stories. It was January 8th, and I wanted to cover the story of a group of Kenyan domestic workers camped in front of their consulate waiting to be repatriated. They were accusing diplomats of ignoring their plight. They wanted to get paid for their work and to be able to go home. They didn't want to speak to me at first, and I didn't know what I did wrong. I just asked one more question before I left. Does anyone want to tell me how they've been mistreated? One of them turned and spoke to me. They had been locked in bathrooms, denied food. Sometimes they would only be given as little as bread and tea. Others were ordered to sleep at 11 p.m. and wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. I had read so many reports on the Kafala system and modern slavery, but the story resonated deeper. I felt there was more to it than just an unjust law. That same week, my mother's friend asked us to host her employed domestic worker at our house for a day or two. The first day, as I was about to leave the house, I noticed that it was 1 p.m. already and she had not yet eaten. So I asked, "Are you okay? Why didn't you eat?" She replied, "I want to go get a manouche." For me, it was simple. I said, "Just go get one." But only when I gave her permission did she actually go to get herself some food. Then it dawned on me. This was the norm in other households. Abuse can be subtle and can happen systematically on a daily basis without much fuss. But it leaves traces forever and often results in PTSD. I didn't know. Many people probably don't know this either. So I Googled. I stumbled upon a research paper by Darren Holland, who spent time in Beirut looking into the Kafala system and how it built a hierarchical racist system that pays and treats domestic workers differently, according to skin color and country of origin.
So people don't consider them with the same way that they would, a Lebanese person, especially, and I think the kind of, there's sort of a hierarchy of development at play where it's because they're from poor countries and are assumed to live in, bad conditions in their countries, that they should be grateful to come to Lebanon and be able to live in this country and work and make money. And that even though, the salaries that they make are, tiny, that it's much more than they would make in their country. So they should be happy and be obedient and, do whatever their employer says. So this kind of narrative of who's deserving to come here and who kind of deserves to have rights and protections.
Holland explained that the hierarchy puts Filipinas at the top of the list. Bangladeshi and Ethiopian women came second. Women from various other African states came last. The difference is not only in wages, but also in the treatment they receive from many employers. The lowest salaries, ranging between $200 to $250, are given to African, Ethiopian, and Bangladeshi women. The highest they could get was $300, depending on their employer's generosity. Filipinas had a minimum wage of $400, but when employed by diplomats or rich families, their salaries could amount to $2,000 or $3,000. I met a Filipina lady while doing a snow hike on a Sunday, and she agreed to an interview. She told me that she's been in Lebanon for 15 years and that she had never dealt with racism. She actually really loved it here and was treated nicely by her employer's family. But this was not always the case. It is because of years of work by advocacy groups that resulted in the government of the Philippines imposing bans and requesting a certain standard of working conditions for migrant workers. It was also not the case for domestic workers from other countries. They were not assessed based on their skills as employees, but for obedience and origin. The stereotypes one recruiter explained to me were shocking. One stereotype said that Ethiopians were seen as the best match for their Lebanese employers. They were okay with restricting their phone hours, sleep schedule, and they were okay with asking permission to get a manouche. Essentially, they didn't fight back. Then I spoke to Francisca Ankara, development officer at Enya Lenya, an organization founded in 2017 by a group of domestic workers and feminist activists. They got together to offer support and create a community after experiencing that daily, subtle, and sometimes not so subtle abuse for a long time. Ankara herself was the daughter of 2 migrant workers, one from Ghana and the other from the Philippines.
The experience, I think, of all domestic workers in Lebanon, or people of color in Lebanon, is that you have to be on the defense all the time because basically everybody is out to get you, either by catcalling you or accusing you of theft or whatever it is, or you have to always be prepared and on the defense for something. Like you kind of don't deserve to be in a specific space or take up space in the first place. And so you always have to prop yourself up and just rely on yourself to be smart and quick in case you're put in a difficult situation or a dangerous situation. It's just mentally exhausting as well. Many of them have symptoms of trauma and find it very difficult to reintegrate in their communities. Their families find them almost unrecognizable when they go back home, just because their attitudes have completely changed, and they do definitely need some psychological support. And it's definitely something to consider, the effects of racism and abusive practices against domestic workers in Lebanon are not just experienced in Lebanon; they carry them back with them to their countries of origin, and it stays with them, if not for a lifetime, for a really long time.
What I take with me from this story is that we need to open our eyes and look at daily life. We tend to cover events that seem out of the ordinary. We try to expose corruption and embezzlement, and that is important. But sometimes we need to look deeper within us and within our society in order to see those seeds of evil that go too many times unnoticed. This was Dana Hourany for this week's story behind the story. My other co-workers will host you next week. Stay tuned.